All right. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Thank you for making it to part 4 of Revelation Reveals Jesus. We're starting our second half as we're looking at the book of Revelation. As we talked about last weekend, the first half of Revelation that we explored last weekend is primarily dealing with the historical Christianity throughout history, and dealing with historical time periods. But now we are on the second half of the book of Revelation, which is dealing with events of the future. Um, Before we get started, let's have a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for bringing us all here together tonight, and thank you for your Sabbath. And I just pray that your presence and your spirit will be with us all this evening as we look into your word and we study it together. Pray that you will give us wisdom and discernment. And I just pray that you'll give us open minds and open hearts to receive the message that you have for us this evening. Pray all these things in your name, Jesus. Amen. All right. Um, well, let's get started. We're going to turn our Bibles to Revelation chapter 13. All right. Revelation 13 says this. Real quick, I forgot to change my Bible here from King James to New King James, so I'm going to do that real quick. There we go. All right. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. All right. I know that was a lot there, but we're about to go through and unpack that. Let's start with the great sea beast that we see to start off the chapter. So we notice that, first of all, this beast comes from the sea. In Bible prophecy, a sea represents a populated area. And we know this from the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 15, where it says, "Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." We're going to be exploring Revelation chapter 17 tomorrow morning, actually, for church. You're not going to want to miss out on that. We're going to be going in depth on that. But we can see that the sea represents multitudes of people, represents a populated area. We see that, like the dragon that we looked at in Revelation chapter 12 last weekend, which we were able to identify the dragon as Satan, we see that this beast likewise has 7 heads and 10 horns. These represent political powers. So we can see that this beast works through political powers in a similar way that the dragon does. The dragon, as we saw, works through political powers to accomplish his purposes. And we can see that this beast who comes up from the sea also works through political powers to accomplish his purposes. We see some interesting characteristics here for the beast. We see that he is like a leopard, but his feet are like a bear. His mouth is like a lion. This is actually very familiar for those who have read the book of Daniel. We saw in Daniel chapter 7 that there was going to be 4 great empires represented by various beasts. And one of them was a bear, one of them was a lion, one of them was a leopard. And we see that this beast has kind of characteristics from different of these, which is very interesting. So we see that this is definitely an allusion to the book of Daniel, to the powers in the book of Daniel. We also notice that this beast that comes up uh, has a name of blasphemy. That also is very similar to something else we saw in the book of Daniel, which was the little horn that we saw coming up out of the fourth beast, which was the Roman Empire. So we see some very interesting characteristics here that parallel the book of Daniel, chapters 7 and 8. We see that this beast has names of blasphemy from this chapter. We see that this beast makes war on the people of God. Uh, we see that um, we see that this beast reigns for 42 months. How long is 42 months? We did the math last weekend, and if we've also done the math previously when we looked at the book of Daniel, and we've determined that that is a period of 1,260 days. That was the same amount of time that the little horn power from Daniel, from the book of Daniel, reigned for as well. So if we are connecting the dots here, we can see that this beast that comes up from the sea is actually the same exact power as the little horn from the book of Daniel. And we can clearly identify this as the papacy of the Roman Catholic Church. So there was a period of 1,260 years that we call the period of papal supremacy. And that was AD 538 to AD 1798. That was the period of history that the Pope was essentially the head of Europe, his head over the countries in Europe. And this connects to this beast, says that to this beast we see in Revelation. So it's the same thing. It's the papacy, that 42-month period, or that 1,260-year period of papal supremacy. Great. We see he speaks great blasphemies. Does the papacy speak great blasphemies against God? Yes, it does, because the Pope claims to be God on earth. The Pope claims to have the authority of God. In fact, the Pope actually claims to have more authority than God because the Pope and his priests, they claim to have the power to forgive sins. They claim during the Mass that they have the power to call Christ down from heaven and to put his presence into the bread and the wine, which one Catholic author said made God, in a sense, subordinate to the power of the Pope and his priest. That's blasphemy. So we see that all these characteristics, they match perfectly with the papacy of the Roman Catholic Church. I'm going to pause here for a moment just to say we are going to be talking this weekend a lot about the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church. Last weekend, we did talk quite a bit about the Roman Catholic Church, mostly the Roman Catholic Church throughout history. This weekend, we're going to be talking a lot about the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church as it relates to the present and the future. So I just want to just say, as we're talking about the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church, we are not calling Catholic people, we're not saying that all Catholic people are beasts or that they are evil people. I believe that there are many sincere Christians who are in the Catholic Church, but nonetheless, I do believe that the Roman Catholic Church is a false religious system. I believe that it stands directly in opposition to God and His Word. I think you can see that it's very clear from the Bible and also from history. But that being said, there are some things that we do have in common with Catholics. There are some beliefs that we do share in common. There are not many, but there are some. And I do believe there are many sincere Christians who are in the Catholic Church. So I just want to say that as we're talking about this, we're talking about the papacy and we're talking about the Catholic Church as an institution. We are not directing all of this against the sincere Christians, many sincere Christians who are in the Catholic Church. All right. We see that this beast received a deadly wound. And the question is, did that happen in history? Was there a point in history where the papacy received what we could call a deadly wound? Yes, there is. This occurred in AD 1798. It's what ended the period of papal supremacy. The atheist French under General Berthier marched into Rome and they unseated the Pope and they placed him into captivity. We clearly identify this as the deadly wound, and even people at the time, even Christians at the time, recognized that that event was significant. They recognized that that was the deadly wound that had been prophesied by Revelation chapter 13. So we can clearly identify this event, the Pope being unseated and placed into captivity by a foreign power in AD 1798, as the deadly wound. But we see that the beast was going to heal from this deadly wound. The deadly wound was not going to completely cut this beast out of the picture. And we can see that the papacy, though that was a big blow to the papacy and its earthly power for the time, we can see that the papacy has been recovering from that. It did not completely put an end to the papacy or the Roman Catholic Church. And in a general sense, the deadly wound that we see actually was a gradual process. Protestantism began this process when the Protestants split away from the Catholic Church. And the deadly wound period, you could say, continued until 1929. We can clearly see in AD 1929 that the wound is very much starting to be healed from that point onward. By 1870, the Papal States, which was the Pope's earthly power, it was his is what made the Catholic Church a state. Those were taken away from the Pope in 1870. So it was during that deadly wound period. But in 1929, the Catholic Church was once again made a state power, which means that since 1929, the Catholic Church is the only church that is also its own country. And in 1929, what happened was Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator, gave the Vatican City to the Pope, making it a sovereign country. So state power was restored back to the Catholic Church. Um, all right, so we have clearly identified the sea beast as the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church, and so let's move down. What is the land beast? This beast that comes up from the earth. So a sea represents a well-populated area, represents an area with a lot of people. We see that the papacy came up in Europe. It was a well-populated area. Um, the earth represents a sparsely populated area. We can identify this historically as North America, and the power that rose up out of this sparsely populated area, out of North America. There's only one country from North America that rose up from this sparsely populated area and became a power, and that was the United States of America. Um, let's look at some of these characteristics and see if that matches up with this beast that we see here. So we see that this beast that was going to come up out of this area was going to have two horns like a lamb. So it's going to be like a lamb, but speak like a dragon. So let's compare that to the United States. Was the United States a lamb-like power when it began? So let's talk a little bit about history at the time. Religious liberty didn't exist for most of human history up until the creation of the United States. The reason we have religious liberty is because of the United States of America. Religious liberty, okay, I think most of us would agree that's a lamb-like quality. So religious liberty, um, just civil liberties in general, freedom of speech, freedom to write and publish things that you want, even if the government doesn't like it or other people don't like it. And the freedom to assemble together. You know, those are, again, freedoms that did not exist for most of human history until the United States. And I think, again, most of us would agree that's a very lamb-like quality. So we see that the United States of America, we could definitely see it being a lamb-like power. It gave us religious freedom. It gave us civil freedoms like free speech, free press, the freedom to gather together. America has long been reputed as having one of the best legal systems in the world, as having the best justice system, as producing the best justice for people. Those are, again, lamb-like qualities. Most of us would want a good a country with a good legal system, a country that has a good justice system that is reputed to provide good justice for people. Now, I know many of us would make fun of perhaps our legal or our justice system today, but for most of American history, America has always been reputed as having one of the finest legal and justice systems in the world. That's, again, lamb-like qualities. So we can clearly see the United States was a lamb-like power. It was founded on excellent principles. It was founded on freedom of conscience. It was founded as an idea for people to be a place where people would have freedom, a place where people could get justice from their courts, from their legal system. These are lamb-like qualities. But it says that this lamb-like power is going to speak like a dragon. Speaking like a dragon is not so good. So how is this lamb-like power, the United States of America, going to speak like a dragon? First of all, what does it mean to speak like a dragon? Ultimately, the dragon represents Satan. So if the dragon represents Satan, what does Satan do? Does Satan Does Satan want people to have freedom? No, Satan doesn't want people to have freedom. Satan wants the principles that Satan uses is the opposite of the principles that God uses. God gives us freedom of will, he gives us freedom of choice. Satan wants to use coercion and force on people. We see that if and how he has acted throughout history, the different political and religious powers that Satan has used throughout history, force and forcing things against people's consciences is one tactic that Satan has resorted to over and over again. So, speaking like a dragon indicates that this lamb like power at some point is going to resort to using force or coercion against people to force them to do things against their conscience. It says that this lamb-like power exercises all authority of the first beast in his presence, that first beast being the papacy, and causes the earth and those to dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So we see from this verse, from verse 12 in this chapter, that the United States of America at some point in the future is going to use its immense power to cause those who dwell on the earth, which is who dwell within its borders, to worship the first beast being the papacy. So at some point in human history, the United States is going to use this power to force people to, as it were, worship the papacy. And does America have immense power? America is considered to be the only global superpower. So when we see in this chapter about this lamb-like power, the United States of America, using its power to force people to help the world go after the beast, it really is not hard to see. I mean, just look what happened earlier this month. We were able to come in and remove a leader of a foreign country in just a few hours, and that country wasn't able to do anything about it. We were able to come in and remove another country's leader in our own hemisphere, and they weren't able to do about it. We exercise immense power. The United States is the most powerful country on earth. It's not hard to see how the United States would be a good ally to have in order to force people to worship the first beast, the papacy. And I'm not saying that our power has not been used for good things throughout history. I believe it has been, but we can see in the future that this power is not going to continue to be used for good things. So we see, going to verse 15, he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So let's talk about that, the mark of the beast. What is the mark of the beast? So we see that at some point in the future, the United States is going to force people to, as it says in this chapter, worship the image of the first beast, and it's going to force them to receive some sort of mark that's going to indicate their allegiance to this first beast, which is the papacy. So what is the mark? To know what the mark is, let's first talk about what the sign is, the sign of God. We see how God is, we've talked about how God is sealing the people who are true to him, and how that there's going to be a sign. What is the sign of God's people? Well, if we go back to the book of Exodus, let me pull up here. I believe it's in Exodus chapter, oh, there it is. Exodus 31:17, God says that the Sabbath is his sign for his people. He says, "It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth." And Ezekiel 20, verse 12 says, I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. So God gave the Sabbath to be the sign between him and his people. What does Satan like to do with God's signs? He likes to counterfeit them. So if the Sabbath is the sign of God's people, then what could we conclude is going to be the mark of the beast power? The mark of the beast power is going to be a counterfeit sign. That's what a mark is. It's a mark is another word for sign. So the mark of the beast is going to be a counterfeit sign for God's Sabbath. What day has been substituted for the Sabbath by the papacy? We know that that day is Sunday. The Roman Catholic Church worships and keeps holy the first day of the week, Sunday. Even though God says in his word that his people are to keep the seventh day holy as a Sabbath. So Sunday worship is a counterfeit of God's sign, which is the seventh day Sabbath. Um, so we can see that the mark of the beast is Sunday worship. Now, again, I'm just going to pause for a minute and just say there are many Christians. In fact, the vast majority of Christians go to church on Sunday. So naturally, the question that some people would think at this point would be, okay, if Sunday worship is the mark of the beast, does that mean that Christians who are going to church on Sunday right now have the mark of the beast? No, it does not, because the mark of the beast has not happened yet. This is clearly a future event. Right now, the United States has not passed any law forcing us to go to church on Sunday, although we can see from this passage that that is going to happen sometime in the future. There is going to be a national Sunday law that is going to be passed in this country. We can see that clearly from Scripture because it says that the lamb-like power that speaks like a dragon, which we've identified as the United States of America, is going to use its power to force people to receive the mark of the beast, which is Sunday worship. But this is a future event. This hasn't happened yet. So this means that there are Christians in other denominations who are going to church on Sunday, but that doesn't mean they have the mark of the beast because the mark of the beast event has not occurred yet. That's a future event. Christ says that in John, I believe it's chapter 10, he says that he has sheep of other folds. And he says that at some point he's going to bring those sheep together into one fold under him as their true shepherd. That hasn't happened yet. What this means is that yes, I firmly believe that the Seventh Day Adventist Church is God's last day remnant church. It is the true church that has these messages. Um, but that doesn't mean that people outside of the Seventh Day Adventist Church are automatically lost just because they're outside the Seventh Day Adventist Church. Christ says he has sheep of other folds. But once this mark of the beast event happens at the end of time, God is going to make it very clear to every person that you are either need to choose to follow God and be faithful even in the face of potential of persecution, and to choose to keep his seventh day holy because that is the sign between him and his people, or you're going to uh, continue in Sunday worship and receive the mark of the beast. That will be made clear to everybody. And that is when Christ is going to bring all of his sheep together into one fold, and he is going to be their shepherd. But right now, we're in the period of time where Christ has sheep from other folds. That doesn't mean that we don't continue preaching on this. We do. We want people to know the truth. We want to bring this truth out. We want everybody to hear it, and we want people to come in and to have the truth. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that people who are in other denominations right now who are worshiping on Sunday have the mark of the beast. That hasn't happened yet. That doesn't mean that they are lost. So I just want to make that clear. There is going to be a huge, we're gonna witness a huge separation when this event happens in the future. When that Sunday law is passed, when it's made very clear that Sunday, to everybody, that Sunday is the identifying mark that they are being forced to receive, and they can either choose to receive that, or they can choose to be faithful to God. And at that point, that is when Sunday worship will be the mark of the beast, and that anyone who continues in Sunday worship at that point is going to have the beast mark, and at that point they are going to be lost. But we're not at that point yet. All right. Verse 18, and I would say that amongst a lot of people, um, this number here, 666, this is a very common something very common that is brought up from people, particularly people who are non-Adventist or non-Christian. A lot of people wonder, like, what is 666? What is this number here in Revelation? So it says, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666." So the Sabbath, God's true Sabbath, is on the seventh day of the week. So that is why we see the number seven as a number of completion. God created the earth in 6 days, creating man on the sixth day. Then God rested on the seventh day and he hallowed it. 7 days, that's completion. We see that number seven is like a number of completion because God completely created everything in 7 days, and that seventh day is very special. It's the Sabbath. 666. Six is not completion. Okay, if 7 days in the week, seventh day is the holy day, that's completion. Six is not, and it's interesting how the six gets substituted for the seven, because on the sixth day God created man. So this very much is the number of a man, because it stops on the sixth day and says everything's complete now, ending at man, and Sabbath is completely unrecognized. So 666 is basically emphasizing, and in the Bible, when something's used 3 times, we see that when we looked at last week at the three woes: woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. That's emphasizing the woe. We see in Isaiah where it says, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts." Why does it say holy 3 times? It's emphasizing the word holy there. This is emphasizing six. But there is another way that 666 figures in here as well. That would be the title of one of the titles of the Pope, and that is, and I can finger spell this, Mom, if you want me to, because it's in Latin. Um, Vicarius Filii Dei. And in English, that title translates to Vicar of the Son of God. Vicar basically means representative, one who's standing in place of or representing someone. So, if we those are that phrase is in Latin, and in the Latin number system, they reuse numbers. I'm sorry, they reuse letters for numbers. You probably noticed that if you saw the study worksheets or even some of the notes for these presentations. You'll notice I really like Roman numerals, what they're called. You'll notice that said like part V, which meant part 5, or part IV, which 4. So if we take the letters that have numerical value out of this title and we add them all up, the number equals 660 and 6. So this is also a reference to the papacy. This title is a reference to the papacy. So we see that 666 is also pointing to the papacy. It's referencing the papacy. And this is something that is even this title is something that the Catholics openly claim for the Pope. And it is interesting that the Catholic Bible, I did find this very fascinating. The Catholic English translation of the Bible in the study notes at the bottom says that the number 666 would be the letters of the name of the Antichrist added together. Now, of course, they wrote that not intending it to point back at the papacy, but in fact, it does point back at the papacy, which is very interesting. All right. Um, so we're going to go ahead and move on to chapter 14 before concluding for tonight. So we see in verse 1, then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of a loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and the Lamb. In their mouth they found in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. This is again another reference to the sealing event that is taking place. 144,000, as we talked about last weekend, is not a literal number. It's a symbolic number. It represents completion. It represents the completeness of God's people that are being sealed. And that sealing event is going on right now. It began in 1844 AD, as we talked about last weekend. God is in heaven. Christ has moved his ministry over to the most holy place. He is finishing his work in the heavenly sanctuary right now, and God is writing down the names of his people in his book of life, and that sealing event is underway, and that is going to be underway until this mark of the beast and all of that's made clear, whether you're going to receive the mark of the beast, which is continue in Sunday worship, or you're going to accept God's Sabbath. So Christ's work and the sealing that is happening underway is going to continue until that event in the future. All right, verse 6, three angels' messages. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water. This first angel's message is very clearly warning the earth, the people of the earth, about God's judgment. The judgment being referred to in this passage is specifically the investigative judgment that began in 1844. What we talked about, God is going through and he is investigating everybody, the dead and the living, and he is putting together his book of life. He's writing down those names. And we know this because the text of this verse says that the hour of his judgment is come. So this is a judgment that is underway currently being referred to. And there would be no point in giving warning to the inhabitants of the world if the judgment had already happened. That's being talked about here. Or if the final judgment were already occurring. So when we talk about the final judgment, the judgment takes place in different stages. So right now we are in the stage called the investigative judgment. That's where God is putting together the court records, and the court proceedings are going on in heaven, as it were. When we talk about the last judgment or the final judgment, we are talking about once those records have been completed, and then God and his people come back to the earth after the millennium for the sentencing. And we're going to be talking about that tomorrow night. So you're not going to want to miss that. You're going to be there. We're going to talk about what is the millennium, when does it happen, and what is this last judgment, what does it look like. So we're going to go into all of that tomorrow night. It's going to be amazing. You're not going to want to miss that. And we're going to go down to the second angel's message, which starts in verse 8. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Fornication also is sexual immorality. As we talked about, the 144,000 are talked about as being virgins. They have not defiled themselves sexually. Now, in the Bible, sexual defilement is used throughout the Bible to represent people who turn away from God, whereas sexual purity in the Bible is a symbol of people who remain true to God. So when it's saying that this Babylon that's referred to, which we're going to talk about that tomorrow morning, what is Babylon? I'm going to talk about that. So Babylon makes all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her sexual immorality. That's meaning that Babylon is a power that has turned away from God, doesn't follow God, and is trying to force everybody else to turn away from God. And this second angel's message is saying this Babylon power is a defeated power, and the reason that Babylon is a defeated power, and that God is going to make it fall, is because she's making everybody turn away from God. All right, verse 9. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark, again, talking about the mark of the beast, Sunday worship, on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. And they have no rest day or night who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. All right. So why does it say that the mark of the beast is received on the hand and on the forehead? I mean, after all, Sunday worship, going to church on Sunday is not exactly forehead and a hand experience. It's not something that gets imprinted on your forehead and put on your hand. This is again representative. God asked the people of Israel, he said, to keep the signs of his covenant on their forehead. We see that in the Old Testament. This is representative of your mind, what you choose to accept. And then your hand, that represents work. So when you receive the mark of the beast on your forehead and on your hand, it's saying that you have chosen to accept open rebellion against God's commandments, and with your works you have chosen to engage in that rebellion against God. You've made your decision. That is what you've decided to do. And we're seeing here two different cups here. We see that there is the cup of the wrath of Babylon, and then there's the cup of the wrath of God. Now, we're going to be talking about this more tomorrow morning. I'm just going to give you a heads up on this. It's better to have the cup of the wrath of Babylon than the cup of the wrath of God, because Babylon's a defeated power. Babylon is going to fall, but God God's not a defeated power. God's not going to fall. And so um, it's better to take the wrath from Babylon because that is only going to last for so long. But the results of God's wrath against sin and against those who choose to rebel against his law, the results of that are going to be eternal. So, two different cups, two very different conclusions, depending on which cup you decide you'd rather go along with. Um, and as we talked about last weekend, when we see phrases like this, the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. They have no rest day or night. We talked about how hellfire does not burn on forever and ever throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity. It's just simply talking about how the wicked who are tossed into hell are not going to have any rest as they are burning up until they are completely consumed. The results of hell are going to be forever and ever. Sin and Satan and sinners who have not repented are going to be destroyed, and the result of that is going to be forever and ever. And they're not going to have a rest day or night in hell until they are completely consumed. So the fire is going to keep burning until it burns up, and the result of that is going to be eternal. So I believe firmly that God has entrusted these three angels' messages to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So we saw in the first message, that 1844 message, the investigative judgment's happening. Fear God, give him glory. The hour of his judgment has come. The investigative judgment's happening. Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and springs of water. This is a message that God has given to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We came out of that 1844 movement, and we are the only Christian denomination who believes in that 1844 message, that message of the hour of God's judgment is come, the investigative judgment is happening. And we are entrusted to give all these three messages. Now, these messages may seem a little bit harsh. They're messages of warning, and God gives warning because he loves people. God doesn't want people, when it comes down to choosing the mark of the beast or the sign of God, God doesn't want people to choose the mark of the beast because he wants what's best for them. He wants them to spend eternity with him. And so the angels are proclaiming these messages of warning with a loud voice because God wants every person to hear these messages of warning. God's warning people ahead of time. He's saying, hey, Babylon is going to be a fallen power. The hour of God's judgment has come. And he's warning people that there is going to be this beast power. There is going to be a mark that you want to avoid. So these are messages of warning that God is giving because he's trying to save people from eternal ruin. And that is our job as Seventh-day Adventists, to be faithful in proclaiming these messages to people, because we want every person to be saved. We don't want people to be deceived and to receive this mark when that happens in the future. So we have a duty to warn the inhabitants of the world of what's to come. The third angel's message is declaring the punishment of those who join Babylon. Again, we're going to talk more specifically about what Babylon is tomorrow morning. You're not going to want to miss that. While it seems that the righteous often suffer throughout history, far greater is going to be the suffering of the wicked who have rejected Christ. We have a duty to warn them. Out of love for them. So in our conclusion, we can see that the beast power coming from the sea is the papacy. We can see that the papacy has always sought to change God's time and his laws. We can see that the land beast that comes up is the United States of America. That's going to factor into history when the United States allies with the papacy in forcing people to accept the mark of the beast, which we have seen is worshiping on Sunday. It's a counterfeit sign because the sign of God, as we have seen, is the seventh day Sabbath. And we have seen that these three angel messages is God with a proclaiming with a loud voice to warn people not to accept the mark of the beast. God's warning people about what's going to happen in the future because ultimately he wants people to choose him. So that is our conclusion for tonight. In the next presentation, we are going to see what God's judgments on the beast power look like. We are going to see what Babylon is, more specifically. In every age, God has always given a message of warning before judgment takes place, and he does that because he loves us, and he doesn't want us to reject him and to suffer the consequences of doing that. So the three angels' messages are Earth's final messages of warning before judgment takes place, and God is warning us because he wants to spare us from that, because he loves us so very much. So my hope for all of you tonight is that this presentation hopefully has given you a sense of the urgency that we have to make sure that these three angel messages are proclaimed throughout the world, that these warnings are given. And I hope too that it also has given you a sense of how much God loves us, to tell us what is going to happen in the future so that we're prepared for it, and to give us these messages of warning so that we can avoid the judgments that are going to take place. Let's end with a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for giving us messages of warning so that we can know to avoid the consequences of what will happen if we continue in a wrong course. Thank you for giving us those messages of warning. And thank you that you use us as a part of your plan to give those messages of warning to the entire world. Thank you that you tell us the things that are going to happen ahead of time, before they even happen, and that we can be 110% sure that your word is true, that it's accurate, and that these things that you're warning us about are going to take place. Thank you that we have that surety and that confidence in you and in your word, because we have seen that your word is always true and that everything that you prophesy comes true. And Lord, I just pray for every single person who has attended this presentation tonight. I pray that we will choose you. And I pray for everyone who's not here tonight, for all the other Christians, and for all the non-Christians out there. I just pray that you will continue to use us to spread your word to other people, to spread these messages to other people, so that they also can choose you, because we know that you love us so much that you gave your only son for us to die on our behalf so that we could spend all of eternity with you. And we thank you for that great love. And I just pray that you'll continue to be with us as we continue this series tomorrow morning and tomorrow night, and that you'll be with us the rest of this evening. I pray all these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.